Hello viewers, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Sajid Sheikh, Assistant Registrar Academic from Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai. I'll be talking about international covenants related to women. I'll begin with the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. She is a renowned American politician. She has said, and I quote, "Where after all do human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerned citizen action to uphold them, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world." Violence against women is recognized in international law as a violation of human rights. The United Nations, since its inception, is committed to the principle of equality, thereby securing men and women their dignity and equality in their rights, opportunities and responsibilities. It is pertinent to note that women who suffered discrimination in the early era were depicted as a voice for putting forth human rights. For example, in Greek literature, Sophocles talks about inalienable human rights of a citizen through a woman. It's a Greek tragedy. One thing we should clearly understand that discrimination in all forms on the grounds of gender are violative of fundamental freedoms and human rights. Gender bias and insensitiveness exhibits itself in the form of discrimination. Crime and violence against women. The United Nations Charter was the first international instrument to define equal rights for men and women in precise terms. Take a look at Article 13, Article 55 and 78 of the Charter. It calls for realization of human rights and fundamental freedom for all, without distinction as to the sex of a person. When the United Nations was founded in 1945, only 30 of its 51 member states accorded women the same voting rights as men. In this context, at its first session in 1946, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 56 Clause 1, recommended that all member states which has not already done so grant women the same political rights as to men. As a result of the United Nations have incorporated a series of treaties and conventions to achieve the equal legal and political rights of women worldwide. We shall be discussing various important covenants related to women in this very module. The first one and the most important one is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. The preamble of UDHR declares human rights as a common standard of achievement for all people and for all nations. Every individual and every organ of the society shall strive to achieve this aim by teaching and educating the masses to promote respect for these rights and freedoms by progressive measures. This declaration is a kind of recommendation, but to whom exactly this recommendation has been made this is not addressed properly. According to Kelson, the declaration is intended to be common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, that the declaration is made with the end that every individual and every organ of the society shall strive to achieve it. According to Article 2 of the UDHR, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without discrimination of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property or other status. Therefore, no discrimination shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional status of the country to which a person belongs. Now let's look at Article 16 of UDHR. It provides right to marry, form a family and dissolution of marriage, and also that marriage shall be entered into only with the free and full consent of the intending parties. It has been affirmed that the family is a basic unit of society which is entitled to protection by the state. In this context, Article 1 and Article 3 of the UDHR are very significant. As per Article 1, it recognizes that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. These articles states that they should act with understanding and spirit of brotherhood. Whereas Article 3 envisages that every person has the right to life, liberty, security of person, irrespective of the country or territory he or she belongs. Furthermore, Article 7 of the said declaration provides that all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of law. Article 3 to Article 21 of UDHR deals with the civil and political rights. Right to life and liberty and persons is covered under Article 3. Freedom from slavery or servitude is covered under Article 4. Similarly, prohibition against torture, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment is covered under Article 5. Recognition as a person before the law, this is very important article, is covered in Article 6. Equality before the law and equal protection of the law without any discrimination is covered in Article 7. And similarly, effective remedy before the national tribunals is covered under Article 8. Freedom from arbitrary arrest, detention or exile is covered under Article 9. Right to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial tribunal is covered under Article 10. So on and so forth, many other articles are there. Various economic and social rights are envisaged under UDHR 1948 as well and are covered from Article 22 to Article 28. Right to social security, for example, is covered under Article 22. Right to work and free choice of employment is covered under Article 23. Right to rest and leisure is covered under Article 24. Similarly, right to a standard of living adequate for health of himself and his family is a right given under Article 25. Education, right to education is there, and so on and so forth. Please note that these rights contemplated in the UDHR are not absolute. The rights shall be provided to the individuals subject to just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. Furthermore, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, that is ECOSOC, 1966 declares under Article 3 that the state parties to the present covenant undertake to ensure the equal rights of men and women to the employment of all economic, social and cultural rights. Similarly, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR 1966 under Article 3 directs the state parties to undertake to ensure the equal rights of men and women to the employment of all civil and political rights. We can infer that the United Nations had attempted to ensure political, social and economic rights to all human beings without any discrimination against women at international arena. However, nature of provisions contemplated in the said proclamation is only recommendatory and it was not strictly binding on the states. However, it contains authoritative interpretation of the provisions of the chapter. The General Assembly of the United Nations proclaimed UDHR as a common standard of achievement for all people and all nations and called upon all member states and all people to promote and secure the effective recognition and observance of the rights and freedoms set forth therein. We all know that India is a signatory to the UDHR. The Constitution of India 1950 came into force on 26th of January 1950 and it was gradually influenced by this very declaration. We can see that if we read the Constitution that fundamental rights enshrined in the part 3rd of the Constitution are identical to the provisions contained in the said declaration. In the case of Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, the Supreme Court observed that Universal Declaration on Human Rights may not be a legally binding instrument, but it shows how India understood the nature of human rights at the time the Constitution was adopted. Thereafter, On several occasions, the Supreme Court has clarified that a number of Indian constitutional provisions are similar to the provisions contained in the Declaration, and the provisions of the Declaration can be referred while constructing judicial pronouncement and interpreting the Indian constitutional provisions. This Convention on the Political Rights of Women 1953 was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on 20th December 1952, which came into force on 7th July 1954. It intends to implement the principle of equality of rights for men and women on equal terms. The Convention further emphasizes regarding recognition of the principles of equality in public employment and choosing the government. Under this covenant, women shall be entitled to vote in all elections on equal terms with men, and there should not be any discrimination on any ground as per Article 1. Women shall be eligible for election to all elected institutions as provided under Article 2 of the Convention. And as per Article 3 of the said Convention, women shall be entitled to hold public office and perform functions on equal terms with men without any sort of discrimination. The Commission on the Status of Women in 1949 expressed the view that a convention on the nationality of married women should be conducted to assure women equality with men, especially with respect to the right of nationality and prevent them from becoming stateless upon marriage or at its dissolution. Subsequent to this, the Commission prepared a draft of the Convention in 1957, which was adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations and was called the Convention on the Nationality of Women 1957. Various commitments were undertaken by the contracting parties. Few important ones we'll be discussing here. One is that neither the celebration nor the dissolution of a marriage between a national and an alien, nor the change of nationality by the husband during the marriage shall automatically affect the nationality of the wife. It also says that neither the voluntary acquisition of the nationality of another state nor the renunciation of its nationality by one of its nationals shall prevent the retention of the nationality by wife of such national. The alien wife of one of its national may, at her request, acquire the nationality of her husband through specially privileged naturalization procedures. However, the grant of such nationality may be subject to such limitations as may be imposed in the interest of national security or public policy. Please note that this cannot be claimed as a matter of right. Declaration on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women 1967. The General Assembly of the United Nations adopted this declaration on 7th December 1967. This declaration pledges to eradicate the discrimination against women in any form. It reaffirms that the principle of equality of rights of women in the worldwide scenario. Article 10 of this declaration states that all adequate measures shall be undertaken to ensure equality of married or unmarried women with men in the social and economic fields, and specifically in employment, and which is with respect to salary, treatment relating to work of similar nature and much more. However, physical incapacity of a woman shall not be treated as discrimination. In order to achieve the provisions incorporated in Article 1, 2 and 55 of the UN Charter, Declaration on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women 1967 was adopted by the General Assembly, of which the United Nations consequently paved the way to the adoption of Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women 1979, which is known as CEDAW. It was restated that the state parties to the international covenants on human rights are under obligation to provide equal rights to men and women in civil, political, social, economic and also cultural field. The specialized agencies have to be established in order to achieve the fundamental objectives of the conventions. and the efforts should be made to root out all forms of discrimination between men and women. According to Article 1 of the Convention, the term discrimination against women means any distinction, exclusion or restriction made on the basis of sex which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment or exercise of a right by women. It is irrespective of their marital status on a basis of equality of men and women in all fields. The implementation machinery for the convention is very weak. We have to realize this. It cannot compel the state parties to give effect to the provisions of the convention. It may simply make suggestions and general recommendations based on the examination of reports and information received from the state parties. The committee sends through the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, a report annually to the UN General Assembly on its activities and may make suggestions and general recommendations based on the examination of reports and information received from the state parties. To make the committee more effective, optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women 1999 was adopted. The General Assembly of the United Nations, through its resolution, adopted the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 1993. This declaration is the first of its kind which exclusively deals with the elimination of violence against women and intended to protect the fundamental right of freedom of women. Under Article 1, the definition of the word violence, it states that it is not only physical or sexual harm to the woman but also includes psychological harm caused to the women. Optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women 1999. By means of this protocol, it was realized by the state parties to the Convention on the CEDAW that there is an urgent need to gear up the all adequate means to ensure full and equal enjoyment of freedom by women of all human rights. Under the said protocol, the state parties agreed that they will recognize and constitute committee to receive and consider communications pertaining to the issue of discrimination in respect of women. It also laid several guidelines in respect to such communication, how to receive it, what procedure has to be followed. After examination of the matter, the committee shall communicate its view and its recommendations to the state party concerned, and within 6 months period, the state party concerned shall submit its written response to the committee and details of measures undertaken. The committee may further invite information from the state party concerned on any particular issue. The committee shall ensure that individuals who gave communication and dealt with the committee are not subjected to ill treatment or intimidation. In this context, India, who is one of the signatories to this protocol, has shown that parliamentary endeavour in the relevant field is there. As a result, in the year 2005, the Parliament has passed the enactment to be called the Protection of Women from the Domestic Violence Act. However, we are yet to experience its effect in crime graph of domestic violence against women. Unfortunately, as the crime statistics to be relied, India is one of the leading country in such type of crime. In 1946, the ECOSOC established its functional committee to be known as the Commission on the Status of Women. The function of this committee was to prepare report and its recommendations relating to measures that are to be taken in promotion of the rights of women in the field of education, politics, civil, social and economics, and to make recommendations on the matter which is of urgent nature in the field of women's rights. At present, the commission is consisting of 45 members, whereas at its inception, there were only 15 members. These members are the representatives of the UN elected by ECOSOC. This commission on the status of women meets biennially, holding the session for 3 weeks. The heads of the state and government gathered in the United Nations headquarters in New York at the dawn of the new millennium and passed what came to be known as the United Nations Millennium Charter 2000. Here in this charter, the states recognized that in addition to the separate responsibilities at the level of individual societies, they have a collective responsibility to uphold the principles of human dignity, equality, equity at the global level. They all have a duty to all, especially the most vulnerable and in particular the children to whom the future belongs. It tried to secure freedom, solidarity, equality, tolerance and much more for both men and women, thereby promoting gender equality. And the empowerment of women as an effective way to combat poverty, hunger and disease and to stimulate development that is truly sustainable. Now let us come to the implementation of these international covenants into Indian legislations. Wherever necessary, Indian courts can look into the international covenants as and when external aid for construction of a national legislation is required. The Supreme Court in Visakhapatnam versus State of Rajasthan took recourse to the International Convention for the purpose of reconstruction of domestic law. The court observed that in the absence of effective domestic law to check the evil of sexual harassment of working women at all workplaces, the contents of international conventions and norms are significant for the purpose of interpretation of the guarantee of gender equality. With respect to rights to work with human dignity, in Article 14, 15, 19 and Article 21 of the Constitution and the safeguards against sexual harassment, which are implicit therein, any international convention not consistent with the fundamental rights and in harmony with the spirit must be read into those provisions to enlarge the meaning and content in order to promote the object of the constitutional guarantee. In Keshavananda Bharti versus State of Kerala, Chief Justice Sikri observed that UDHR may not be a legally binding instrument, but it shows how India understood the nature of human rights. The Constitution makes specific mention of equality between the sexes in Article 14, 15 and 16, which prohibits discrimination against women and also makes room for affirmative action, which is so eloquently spoken in CEDAW and subsequent declarations aimed at implementation of CEDAW. The directive principles of state policy contained in Part 4th of the Constitution directs the state to protect human rights of women, including right to equal pay, right for equal work, the right to health and work in hygienic conditions, right to maternity benefits and much more. The Equal Remuneration Act 1976, the Maternity Benefit Act 1961, the Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act 1994 and the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956 are some of these enactments which owe their existence to the provisions of the Indian Constitution. Even without CEDAW and other conventions, the state was under obligation to bring about gender justice, and yet the importance of the international covenants cannot be kept out of sight. Parliament itself has been endowed with the power to make laws in order to give effect to the international covenants. Let us look at Article 253 of the Constitution. It provides that Parliament has the power to make any law for the whole or any part of the territory of India for implementing any treaty, agreement or convention with any other country or countries or any decision made at the international level. The domestic laws are sovereign and no international covenant can be preferred to the domestic law. In order to make the international covenants effective, all state parties to the covenants agree to enact laws in line with the obligations under the covenants. Most covenants includes a clause requiring that the state parties have to do so. The Constitution has thus made an arrangement by empowering Parliament to make such laws by providing Articles 253 and thereafter by putting an obligation on the state to give effect to the covenants by such enactments, by providing such an obligation under Article 51. In the case of Sheila Barsey versus Secretary, Children's Aid Society, the Supreme Court emphasized the need to give effect to International Covenant. Emphasizing on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights 1966, it said that India, having ratified the declaration, it is the obligation of the Government of India as also the state machinery to implement the same in the proper way. Despite all the gender-specific equality provisions in the Constitution of India and the attempt of the Government of India and also of the Honorable Court, there are many legal provisions which are suffering from gender bias. Section 155 subclause 4 of the Indian Evidence Act snatched right not to be raped from a prostitute. The provision is still on the book despite the fact that the Supreme Court has held that even a prostitute has a right to privacy and it is not open to any and every person to violate her person as and when he wishes. The law relating to succession are glaring examples of inequality still prevailing in our system. Women are not recognized as co-partners in the joint Hindu family. This law, however, was subsequently amended, giving daughters of the deceased equal rights with sons and subjecting them to the same liabilities and disabilities. Justice S. Rajendra Babu, in one of his speeches commenting upon the society's attitude to women, said, and I quote, "Sita was not born but found, and after marriage, exile, Agni Pariksha and abandonment was her lot. Yet there is not a single temple of Sita, and Rama is adored as the ideal man, Maryada Purushottama Adarsha Purusha." In a nutshell, I can say that in order to have an effective convention, both national and at international levels, women need to be better informed about their rights, which are under these international agreements. CEDAW can be widely disseminated to mobilize support amongst women grassroots organizations. It is also necessary to promote the active support and participation of other institutional actors, including legislative bodies, human rights lawyers, academic and research institutions, local community groups, NGOs, the media and youth organizations. They should ask their local government to make the municipal laws at par with these conventions. Moreover, this awareness will strengthen the implementation of these conventions to better serve the purpose. I hope you were able to sufficiently grasp the important provisions of these international covenants related to women. Thank you.